Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Enough to Keep Going podcast. This is episode number 19. We are coming to you from our new home, the GWW Network. Tonight, I'm your host, Osiris Prime, and tonight we have Agassicles Stamos with us, returning actually. It's been a while since he's been on the core show. How's it been going?
Howdy ho! Hey, what's up? Yeah, it kind of hit me tonight that it's like I've been on sabbatical. So, but a lot of stuff has been going on in the background, so it has been a little bit of work to get us moved and transitioned. So yeah, we are in new digs, so to speak, in a new virtual recording studio, if you will, broadcasting from the channel of the Geeks Worldwide radio network, which is a place where I used to be a writer. I used to be the managing editor for a bit, and used to supervise the radio network. So I think you guys kind of know the story, right? I left. David Pecci, who was the entertainment crew for E2KG, also departed with me, just to kind of work on our craft and kind of try forming our own thing, kind of in a quiet space. And so we did that, and joined up with our partners from the Band of Gamers podcast, and formulated the E2KG network. And once we kind of had things up and running pretty stably, we then wanted to partner again with the GWW, who we kind of think of as our parent network. So you can kind of think of it as GWW is kind of our ABC, and we're kind of a local, homegrown, one water tower town kind of TV station.
A local affiliate.
Yeah, little hillbilly station. So yeah, so here we are.
Nice. Well, it's good to have you back. Good to be on the network now too, GWW. So tonight we'll go over our topic of the week here. We'll talk about in a few minutes. We'll go over our weekly playlists, which mine hasn't really changed all too much, but still doing Switch game. But we'll see what else I've been playing. But let's get into our topic here. So I think we're going to do a little something different there this week. We're going to be a little positive, I would say, for the most part. So what we're going to talk about here is we want to talk about what as gamers, what we want in games, what brings us to games, what keeps us in games, what drives us to keep playing something maybe. And this kind of stems from recent articles and news just that have come out about publishers and maybe not so much developers, maybe more so publishers, trying to, I don't want to say tell us, but trying to say that, here's our open world, here's, a persistent world or something like that, and this is what you guys want. But maybe that's not entirely right or entirely correct. That what they think that we want is what we actually want. So we're gonna kind of go over, or at least two of us for the first round here, and then maybe next month we'll go round two with Swissguard and DBQ Hams, and they can give us their perspective of what they want in gaming, what they want in games, what drives them to keep going and play games and such things like that. So let's get started here. And this actually, I guess, stems originally from an article that Agassicles had put up there on PC Gamer. Eurogamer was a podcast that Eurogamer does, Waypoints podcast, that they were talking with an ex-Bioware developer, and he was saying how EA's practices now, or at least for the multiplayer stuff, is let's give them this open persistent world or an open world, and let's throw microtransactions at them. Player cards is what they're talking about specifically here at the beginning of this article about Mass Effect 3, more specifically, how they have player cards in there, and you can buy these cards and you get whatever weapons or skins and stuff like that, and the people are just throwing money at these at this thing, and buying these things up, and that's the kind of direction they want to kind of go in. And we kind of saw that, I guess, maybe coming up with the new Star Wars game that was it Visceral, I believe, that they just closed down, and it looks like they're kind of heading that direction with that game now. They're kind of going a different direction than just more of a single player story driven type of game. So, and they didn't specifically say this is what gamers should do, but this is basically what they want to do, what they want to see happening with at least their games. But so let me ask this to you, I guess, please. what do you want in gaming? Do you want a persistent big open world with things where you got to buy microtransaction kind of type of deal where you got to buy things to get a color? Or I think that's one of the big sticking points in Destiny. You got to buy the shaders now. I believe, or that's how it was at the beginning. I don't know if it's still like that in Destiny 2, or what do you want in gaming? Like gaming in a game, excuse me, nowadays.
Yeah, so the big problem is, so I guess I'm going to do one more line of the negative aspect of it before we try and go positive.
That's all right.
The big thing we wanted to talk about tonight is to try and kind of turn the ship, and the concern I have, and I get this a lot in tech, right, which is another domain that I heavily write and podcast in and about. And if you haven't seen the GWW Network's new tech podcast hosted by myself and GWW owner and publisher Joe Barhoum, More Tech Than Time, which is going to be recording and doing a live show every other week on Wednesday nights. But one of the things that Joe and I have frequently talked about, and I write a lot about, is how I get really bothered when an industry decides that there's not a use case or a demand for a thing. And I get particularly bothered by that because a lot of the times that happens from the vocal minority who are posting things on the internet and posting them in a voice as if they are speaking for everyone, right? Which is something I've personally taken affront to. Although I will readily admit we might do the very same thing here tonight, so I might be a bit of a hypocrite. And then I also despise it when the media does that, right? When I hear podcasters from professional websites and journalists write in their articles, and I mean people who are paid to do this for a living, and they write things like, "There's no use case for X. Nobody wants X. Nobody wants to use a tablet as a productivity device. Nobody wants this product. Nobody wants tablet PCs." And I'm like, no. I'm like, you guys are a minority demographic, right? You guys are journalists. Your workflow is not representative of what the rest of us do on a normal daily basis, right? And so there's a little bit of the same effect going on in the gaming industry, which is what we want to talk about tonight. And it's fortunately maybe not being driven as much by the media, not being as driven as much. It's driven a little bit by gamers in terms of how we're consuming things and paying for things, but a lot of the story of the news cycle the past 2 weeks is how, of the large publishers, they are becoming convinced that what gamers want, and they're extracting that out of the fact that people are paying large sums of money, which is always, from an analytics perspective, a key indicator. People are paying large sums of money to obtain things in games beyond the base $59.99 entry price that they're paying for games. And so the industry is coming around to this perception that that's what we want because we're so willing to pay for it. So when you ask the question, what do I want out of games? Well, what I was thinking as I was, grabbing the last minute stuff to prepare for tonight, I'm like, well, why did we all get into games from the very beginning? Particularly those of us who have been in the culture and in the hobby for decades, right? And I was trying to find my own answer for that, and the answer I arrived at was immersion, right? What I feel like what we on this cast, right, and I would argue maybe a lot of gamers, we got into gaming as a means of discovery, experimentation, exploration in a reality where the laws of physics were suspended, right? Where the things you could do exceeded what we could do in the regular world. And I deliberately use the term immersion because in lieu of escapism, because I feel like in the world, so many anti-gamer movements and people have glommed onto that term and tried to twist it and use it as a negative. Although arguably that's why everybody got into all forms of entertainment, right? People read books as a means of escape. People watch television as a means of escape. But video games specifically, because of the difference, the experiential difference, has always been focused on the interactivity, and so I want to voice it a little bit more as immersion. So what I want out of games is I'm looking for that immersion, and immersion for me doesn't necessarily mean escapism. A lot of times that immersion is how well detailed you can replicate real physical objects and dynamics that I don't have access to in the real world, right? I don't make enough money to be on a Formula One team, right? But I love the games that try as much as they can to almost perfectly replicate what that feels like. So that's what I want first and foremost in a game is immersion. My problem with what EA and Activision are talking about, and I point at those two predominantly for the sake of this discussion, is multiplayer is inherently not immersive, right? By definition, you can't feel. I don't think you can feel immersed in a game and suspend disbelief when there are other people there, right? So the notion, to go to EA's statement in the closing of Visceral and what's going on between them and Amy Hennig, we don't want to make a linear, single-player, story-driven game. And I'm like, well, okay, well then you're basically saying you're getting out of the business of creating immersive experiences. So I mean that's my baseline statement is what I want is immersion, and you don't get immersion when tons of other people are there. You don't get immersion. Your level of immersion gets broken when people are able to pay to advance, and that impinges on your gameplay experience. And you don't get immersion when your depth of investment in the game is periodically disrupted and broken by microtransactions being pushed at you. So that's my starting point.
Quite the starting point. No, I was thinking here while you're talking, and you're talking about how we first got into gaming, and obviously, for me it was way back, Atari 2600 and SNES, or I mean NES, those early games. Obviously, I was a young kid. I was playing them obviously just because hey, there's a little character that I can move around and do stuff and maybe shoot every once in a while, depending on what game I was playing, like Contra or something like that. Rambo. It was something. It was more just visual. It's cool little flashes and colors and stuff like that. But as I grew up, and I guess this more goes into why I kept gaming, and right, it was an immersion. A little bit of escapism, depending on the situation. Maybe I was in at that point in my life. But I like going in there, and the one thing I can really remember is when I first played Gears of War on the 360, and I have had pretty much all the consoles up until that point, more or less. But when I was playing Gears of War, and I had actually got my first HD TV. And I'm walking through some abandoned house or warehouse or whatever, and I can see little drops of water just dripping down from obviously when the house or building had got torn apart, but obviously the piping's still there, and I can hear it, I can see it at the same time, and it was just that that visceral, no pun intended there, sorry Visceral Games, that visceral feeling of being immersed in that kind of world, and having this story. Well, while it wasn't maybe the best in the world, but it was the gameplay and what was going on was what was I was immersed in, and it was just like, wow, I can't believe this is this is happening, and all this other stuff, obviously, and then I start chainsawing people in half, but but otherwise, I was having a really good time, and I had mentioned this I think a few weeks ago. It might have been longer than that. I think it was back when you might have done the last core show, but what I'm looking for is I just I still want to have that kid feeling. I just want to have fun in the game. I don't want to have to worry about unlocking or I want to try to unlock this gun, but I got to do 50 million things before I can do it. Or hey, there's loot crate. Okay, let me jump over to loot crate. Oh, I just got 3 level 2 or 4 weapons, and I can't really use them, so I'm just gonna throw them away. I don't know what to worry about that. It's fine sometimes to do that, but if I got to do that with every game, coming up in the future, I mean, that's just gonna get tiresome and boring after a while. So, yeah, I just want to jump into a game and play that story. I know some games have come out, obviously like Titanfall didn't really have a story. The first Battlefront didn't have a story really in it. Now they started to change that. Titanfall 2 came out. I had that full single player storyline. Still didn't play it yet, unfortunately, but I'll get to it eventually. Battlefront 2 is coming up, and it's gonna have its story. People are griping about that for whatever reasons, but I think it's the length now. It's 5 to 7 hours. Oh, it's too short. Whatever. Anyways, that's another topic I think maybe. But these games are coming out with single player stories. Some games, in some ways, like we got Assassin's Creed, which has been going for the longest time. Yeah, they had multiplayer in them, but for the most part, it was just single player was the driving force in that game. And hopefully that doesn't have loot crates or loot whatever it was back in the Egyptian time. I don't know what it was back then. But hopefully we start getting these more games. You got games like Cuphead, which is single player, a little bit obviously different than everything else, but still it's a single player story. You got this. I still want to buy this game too. I haven't gotten it yet. It's beautiful graphics, beautiful cartoon. Early almost like Mickey Mouse type animation and stuff. And that's what wanted me to get that game in the first place. Just the graphics, which obviously is a different sort of graphics. It's not 3D high fidelity graphics or anything like that. But that's kind of the driving force that gets me going into games. And I do like the multiplayer games. I do like Call of Duty and Battlefield and stuff like that. And I guess you kind of can get immersed in that. Maybe it's not really immersion, but it's a different type of gameplay. Especially if you have people that or even people that you meet up online that you can meet up and do these battles, and you're having fun with these guys. But that's the thing, you're having fun with your friends, and you're having a good time talking and stuff like that. So it's just, I don't know, I guess that's my point of view.
So I guess we said we were gonna, and when we said positive, I guess my thought was what we were mainly talking about was focusing less on griping about what corporate America is doing now, and talking more about what we want out of gamers. And I'm sorry, I'm really distracted. Like I see something, and I'm like, what the heck? Okay, that's the chain from the ceiling fan hanging down. I was like, but in my camera view, it was like something back on the opposite wall, and I was like, what the heck is that? So, but yeah, so right. My big thing is, and I'm still not able to get away totally from talking about, what they're doing that I don't like. But years ago, really as a big part of console generation 7, we had this phenomenon in its incubation. Really, in stage 1 of this was, what we saw about the creeping entry of multiplayer modes into games that historically had been single player or had originally been marketed as single player. Mass Effect. We didn't understand why they were putting multiplayer in that. And originally it was thought because it was an effort to drive sales, because people wanted that that replayability in their game. And then I guess
Dead Space was kind of another one too that they kind of shoehorned.
Oh, really? I didn't even realize that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in the last one, maybe in the second one, but I know for sure in the last one that they had thrown it in there too. I didn't play that game, but I remember that they threw it in because I knew people were griping like, why is multiplayer in this game? It's kind of weird.
Right. Well, in Grand Theft Auto, even when they started putting it in there, so that was kind of stage 1, and when that was going on, a lot of us railed against it, and there was an ongoing argument amongst gamers, right, about, well, you shouldn't feel bad about that they're adding extra content. I'm like, no, like, look, finite resources, right? Your budget funds the resources that you have. If you're paying, if they're funding dozens of bodies to be working on multiplayer, right? Why can't those bodies go to further enhancing the single player experience? A big thing I keep going back to is AI, right? We've gotten really good graphics, we've gotten really good physics engines, we've gotten other stuff. We're doing HDR, and I'm like, guys, for all the money that you're spending on all these bells and whistles and pretty pictures on the screen, what I'd really like is for my AI to not be completely idiotic, right? Ghost Recon, your guy's constantly walking in front of you in your field of fire. Other AI in other games that are completely incompetent. Poor enemy AI that makes things not challenging. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, Killzone 2 when we go to our playlist. But, so I would rather see resources being funneled in that direction and greater expertise and greater fidelity in games and in things like AI. And that argument holds true now in terms of this hyper focus on what is now I'm trying to come up with a term for it. A repeating buy-in cycle. In terms of a business model or a financial model centered around multiplayer. So what I want, right, in order to try and start tilting towards the positive pieces, what I want is I want to see investment, artistry, and greater focus from the industry on that single-player experience. Particularly now because, again, as I've said a few times, I realize now that the Xbox 360 and Xbox Live in those first few years on that platform in 2005, before things started getting bad on the internet, right? I'm realizing it was like a golden age of public multiplayer that I don't think we're ever going to see again. And so now I'm back to being very focused on single player, right? What I want to be able to do is I want to buy games that have a definitive length, and that I can start and finish. I want things like Destiny 2, but here's the big thing I was going to walk through tonight. So let's assume, and this isn't necessarily the case, but let's assume that I buy 2 new games a month. That's $120. 12 months out of a year, that's almost $1,500 that I spend on games. Of those, I only buy maybe 2, maybe 4 that are essentially multiplayer only games, right? And I'll include in that things with very compressed and short single player experiences that are really just like the training segment to prep you for multiplayer. So I'm spending $1,300+ a year on games, right? All of those games are single player. I'll call them single player experiences. They're not all story driven. They're not all open world. So I'm like, and I get that maybe the thought is that so that's where my concerns are. My concerns are to see improvements in the things where I'm spending most of my money, which means solid single player experiences that have that. And I don't even think it's. I was about to say I was about to say, single player story driven, but it's no one thing, right? What I want is I want relative parity in terms of diversity across the industry, right? I want some things that are like Call of Duty. I want some things that are like Destiny. I want some things that are like flight sims and car sims where there's tons of cars, tons of aircraft, and I don't mind microtransactions for that stuff, right? there are probably some racing games where I've bought every microtransaction available over the life cycle of playing that game. But I don't need it forced upon me by multiplayer-oriented incentives. And I want some story-driven stuff, right? What I want is I don't want the whole industry focused on delivering one type of experience at the expense of everything else. And then to have another one of the shows like we had this year, right, which was a discussion of genres that have died.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, like you said, microtransactions aren't inherently evil, I guess, per se. It's just like when they try to force it down your throat, where it negative impacts you. Obviously, that's more so in multiplayer games. But they're starting to creep up in single player. But anyways, so I guess I was thinking while you're talking, and one of the things that I've noticed on myself lately that I've gotten pushed over to more, I guess I don't want to say like pure RPG games, but RPG like games, or some pure RPG games I'm playing. I will be playing. I can't remember what it's called now. the name escapes me, but it's like kind of more of a pure RPG game coming up here. And there's just other games, even like one of the ones I have on my list here for tonight, Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2. It has elements. Obviously, it's not pure RPG because it's mostly a fighting game, kind of like the old style Dragon Ball Z games back in the day. But there's elements in there. You can there's an overworld you can run around in and do stuff and up your stats and do things like that. You create your own player, and I've talked about Skyrim multiple times. Obviously, that's action RPG. So I get pushed into that more so. And when I was younger, back in the day, even probably like 10 years ago, I wouldn't have touched a game like that. I was like, I want to spend my time and let me bump up this guy's health or his stealth or whatever I want to bump up. But I've been driving more toward those games just because I want that kind of, like you're saying, more immersive experience. And yeah, Skyrim, I wouldn't say the story is the greatest in that game, but there is a story there that you can follow. There's multiple paths you can go down, or a couple paths at least that you can go down, and that's what I've kind of gravitated more toward, even though I have like less time to game now, and those games obviously are easily at least over 30 hours at the least, obviously more than that if you doing all the side quests and all like that. So for me, I do like open world games. So I do like, Grand Theft Auto, and the single player and multiplayer was fine, but I had more fun in the single player, I think, just because there's not so many people griefing you and stuff like that. So but then I go for things like Minecraft, where there is no story. There's a story if you want to follow it, but basically it's just here you can destroy and build whatever you want in the world. And not Lego Dimensions, Lego Worlds is the same way. Those kind of games are, I guess, more of like mindless fun, where you can just kind of sit there and kind of like veg out and just let your creative juices kind of go, and you can do whatever you want. So I mean, it kind of goes back and forth, but for the most part, I'm going toward more that RPG-ish type of game. So is it what would you say will bring you back to a game or let you keep playing a certain type or a certain game or a certain type of game?
Yeah, so so kind of where do the gamer mentalities and ethoses, I guess, I don't know. That
Ethos? I don't know.
that you and I have talked about, if those things are accepted as being some of the things that gamers want, where does that meet in the middle with what the corporations are saying? And the guy, I think you mentioned him, the guy who was a former EA developer who's now kind of struck out on his own, or producer or creative director. What they're saying is they have ballooned their budgets to $100 million to make a game. I don't understand why they can't contract those budgets and make smaller gaming experiences, but whatever. A big AAA game now is hundreds of people, in $100 million budget, and to recoup that investment, that the publishers are making, they want games set up that cause players to come back. Man, it's the model that I like the most is Forza's model, where for the first year roughly there's a game pack there's a car pack like every month, and that you can just choose to buy those or not buy those, and that they're there and they're available, but there's never a point. And I haven't played this year's Forza 7, so I don't know if they've walked away from the formula that I saw in 5 and 6. But there's a spot on the menu for you to kind of porpoise into that menu space and elect to buy that content. There's never a time. The thing that I think like a lot of us dislike is that in a racing game you go to race the game, you lose, and in the results they drop an overlay on top that says if you had better tires, right, for $4.99, right, you might win this race. And I'm like, no crap, you're not telling me anything I don't already know, right? Because you've trained me how to play the game, and I know that already. But I'm looking at my race results, and I'm trying to get my head wrapped into what did I do wrong, and and the answer to that question is not, oh man, what I did wrong is I really should have bought the $4.99 better tires, right? So, I've talked a lot recently about just building games where where the game subsystems get out of the way, get from being in between the gamer and their controller and the screen, and just allow them to play the game. So it's fine for microtransactions to be there. Make them worthwhile, make them vary whatever different characteristics that you think people were buying into the game for in the first place. But don't set them up in such a way that it impedes me from experiencing the game or disrupts that immersion.
Yeah, and I think for me, what kind of brings me back to games, or certain types of games. Once again, I'll use Skyrim. There's so much to do in that game. You can follow the story if you want, but then there's side quests, and then there's side quest to side quests. I mean, there's just multiple things, the multiple paths you can branch out into in that game. And like I said, for me at least, that so many things that you can do, that's what drives me to play that game. So I can sit there and I'll play, like when I first played Skyrim, because I played it like at least twice, and probably a third time once it comes out on Switch. But the first time I played it, I did like the story, maybe 2 or 3 quests that you had to do for the story at the beginning, and then I just went off and did side quests, and that's all I was doing, like pretty much for like months on end. Every once in a while I jump back in the story, but it was mostly just side quests. And then finally, once I wouldn't say exhausted the side quests, because I don't think you can. I think they're procedurally generated, so they go on forever basically. Once I was exhausted with those quests, then I jump back into the story, and I kind of finished off at least the story part of the game. Even after that, I jump back and I can do this and that. And so that's what gets me back going for at least open world games. Give me lots to do. Now I'm probably gonna get a little bit of flack for this, but as much as I like Zelda, a little boring at times, because you're just running to a tower, or you're running to one of the shrines or whatever it is, and that's pretty much kind of all you're doing. At least as far as I've seen, I'm probably like, I don't know, 3, 4, maybe 5 hours in this game, and maybe it opens up a little bit more after that. I'm not sure. I know there's been some side quests that I've picked up in couple of towns I've gone to, but it's not a lot. Not like in Skyrim and other games I've played, or GTA. So it's still a great game. I still love it. That game of the year contender for me, down the line when we start talking about that kind of stuff, but a little boring at times. Like I said, I've only been going for it for a few hours, so maybe it opens up a little bit more. But give me all, throw just all kinds of stuff for me to do. There was a game back in the day, and I keep blanking on stuff and I can't remember, but it was kind of the same thing as Zelda. Like there's this huge open world. It was just kind of empty, basically. I think it was a Western. It wasn't Red Dead, obviously, because you can do a lot of stuff in there, but it was something else that, it was just huge, gorgeous world. Actually, now that I think about it, Just Cause was kind of like that on like kind of the first 2 games. The third game, that game is so crazy. You can just do all kinds of stuff in that game now. So, and that's more of a gameplay mechanic than kind of like the story. It pretty much has, most of the story elements in it, but, you can just do crazy, stunts and stuff now in that game. So that keeps you occupied in different things. But, for me, that's what keeps me going. So, I'm trying to look at the time here.
And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, so to maybe provide a better answer than, that convergence point where I'm a gamer who's going to continue to pay money into a game beyond my initial buy-in as an alternative to these crazy microtransaction schemes built around multiplayer. I would say number one, I think what Destiny did for the first one is completely acceptable. I think, particularly for something with like RPG elements to it, right? Making an expansion pack that carries with it an auto level upgrade because you bought the expansion pack, and there really wasn't anything between. At the time when it dropped, right? There really wasn't anything between me and level 40, other than just putting in the time and grinding, right? And that's not really the game experience itself, right? So that I don't equate as there being a problem for me paying to have skipped. And obviously by skipping to level 40 in Destiny, that opened a lot of things up. So I think that kind of model is completely fine if you put it out far enough past the game's initial release.
Yeah, I mean, that's good. And the other thing I was going to say, as far as like multiplayer stuff, when I was playing like Call of Duty and Battlefield, originally and this is something that's kind of weird that I kind of forgot to mention back on the news. It wasn't the news show. Maybe it was the core show of last week when we were talking about microtransactions and loot boxes. Actually, more specifically, they actually had Call of Duty had loot boxes like years ago. They started off with it, or I shouldn't say started off with it, but they had it in the game where you can know.
But that was a perk, right? That you would earn in combat. Like there was no way to get that outside. Like you
just unlock it through the game. You're talking about?
Yeah, I thought that was the thing. Or if we're talking about the same thing, it was the, I want to call them drop boxes, right? But it was the equipment drops, right? You know, if you did well enough, you know, you would periodically earn a loot drop, but it would drop somewhere on the map, and then everybody had to fight their way to get there to get it first.
Yes, but that actually evolved into them just having outside the game, like when you go into the menus, like in between matches, you can actually unlock that box. They put it in the menus basically. They didn't put it in the game anymore.
Right.
And basically, it was just a loot crate. You know, you can pay for money, excuse me, for like COD points, whatever they called it, and you know, buy it like that, or you can just earn those points in game, through the matches, depending on how well you did. So I mean, that was fine. And there was weapons in there, yeah, and they might have had a little slight upgrade, but it didn't break the game like some of the games nowadays.
Right.
It looks like in the future. So, I don't know, how or why people forgot about that, but they didn't really mention it, in these past few weeks when the other stuff came out. But before that, before they started doing that, all it was just unlocking weapons and unlocking, armor, or not really armor, but just like color palettes and stuff like that, shaders and things like that. And that brought me back to the game. I wanted to do it. I wanted to unlock this next gun so I can try to use it and and all that stuff. So on the multiplayer side, at least for me, that's what that kind of kept me going. So
right. And the last thing I'll mention is then if you want to incentivize me to make more of those microtransactions, do a Mass Effect and pull things forward, right? I don't really understand why it is the gaming industry has chosen to approach like what Mass Effect did as this unicorn that nobody can replicate. Like, does it make sense that I can't bring content that I had in one game into the sequel? Like Forza, and again, and I'm completely fine with the Forza franchise. I haven't checked out again 7 to see whatever the brouhaha was about microtransactions in that game, but I'm like, so I bought Forza 6. I bought the Ultimate Edition. I got all the expansion packs. Right? Does it make sense that they couldn't, to pull me along and make me feel more invested? Is there any reason why I couldn't have grabbed like one of those packs from? It could be a one-time migration too, right? If they could have, if they could show me, hey, here are all the expansion packs that you bought. You get to bring one with you into Forza 7, and it's a one-time move. And once you bring it over, right, it's not. You have to open it, right? And those cars go into your garage. Like, they can definitely do systems like that, but they don't, right? And they haven't yet, so.
No, unfortunately, no. Yeah, I don't. And, you're mentioning bringing stuff over. I mean, that was the same thing with Destiny 1 to Destiny 2. You're only able to bring certain things to Destiny 2, but anyways, I want to start down that path. Because you know me and Destiny. But just to wrap it up here, I think, and you kind of mentioned this earlier too, one of the major things they can do maybe in the future to make things more interesting and make us, people come back is, get working on that AI, because a lot of times now AI is just bad. It's just bad in games. It's just, I mean, you have soldiers, like if it's a single player game, say like COD or something, they're just kind of standing there and they're shooting you, and maybe they kind of duck and pop back out. But I mean, make it a little more natural, maybe. I mean, I know it's kind of hard. Obviously, it's just computer, but if they worked on that maybe, and worked on that single player, and instead of doing these huge multiplayer or MMO type games, maybe they can make some advancement in that field. But I think for me that would be the big thing in the future that I would like to see change, and make me come back to games if they had really good AI in there, not totally just spamming you to death too with gunfire from all sides, but something a little bit more strategic. So that's my last thought. I don't know if you had anything maybe for future games that you would like to see.
No, I think we got it all out. Is mainly talking about what we would hope to be the list of things that that those companies would see as the things gamers want. Because I know that there's a demographic, people who spend a lot of money to buy those microtransactions, but I'm gonna go back to an old label that I introduced on Bandit Gamers, and I know that there are people out there. These are these gamers who in my opinion, kind of started. They evolved out of the Neanderthals that we other gamers were in console generation 7, right? So maybe they were Cro-Magnon gamer, but these were the guys who, when I would walk into GameStop, like they bought a console, and the only thing they played, every year they bought the next Madden and the next Call of Duty, right? And things of that ilk, right? Call of Duty, Battlefield, right? Those, I get it. Those, and then they would play Madden. These were the guys who played Madden online, right? So I get it, right? But I think that that's a very small percentage in terms of total demographic of the gaming community and user base. And those individuals spend lots of money, and maybe they incentivize other people to spend lots of money in microtransactions, and that's improving EA and Activision's bottom line, but they're not representative of the vast gamer population and base. And they're right. I mean, at a certain point, you go, well, is EA making the types of games that I want to play? And we talked earlier this year in the E3 coverage, like how thin Activision's portfolio was at E3, and this leak of this patent that they have for microtransactions. I don't know how much that's going to help them, but again, the people who buy these things and spend money on those microtransactions, I don't think they're going to hesitate because of that leak. I think they're still going to buy it. So my thing is, you've got those people, right? Now what are you going to do for the rest of us?
Yeah, and I think, in the long run, okay, those people are going to buy Madden and Call of Duty and all those things, year after year. But after a certain point, they might be, like, oh, I don't want this anymore. I don't want to do it, since it's just a one-time thing or one game that they're doing. So, these developers or excuse me, publishers really got to think of the long game, where, you got these other groups like us that have been gaming for a while, and, other people coming in, when we see stuff like that, if they're going to start doing just microtransactions, like, we're not going to buy that stuff anymore. Once we stop buying, those other guys stop buying eventually too. And then, I mean, they're just going to be, up the creek, as it were. So, but I think we've pretty much dealt with that topic pretty good here right now. But let's move over to our playlist for this week. I'll start off here. So once again, I'm playing pretty much Switch the last week or so. I've been playing a little bit of Lego. I went back to Lego City Undercover only because my son was playing that over the weekend, and that actually have a cartridge of, so it was in the system. So I was like, all right, I'll play that. Cool. Once again, GTA style type of game, as I mentioned before, but you're playing the cop this time, and there's no swearing in this game, so it's kids' game.
So now, have you also been a player of Lego Dimensions?
Yes.
Okay. So were you impacted by them laying that taking that property out of development circulation and saying that there's not going to be any more expansion packs?
Yeah, putting the kibosh on. Yeah, I mean that kind of hit home. And the same thing with Disney Infinity. Me and my son were playing that a lot all the time, and obviously we can still play it, but there's not going to be any more new content. So yeah, I mean it's a bummer that they're going to do that, but I think kind of everybody saw the writing on the wall. So it's just pretty much what Skylanders now, and even that they didn't have a release this year, I don't think, or this past year.
Just Imaginators on the Switch.
Yeah, but that originally came out last year, right? Last holiday.
I think it was a holiday release on the PlayStation 4 last year. Yeah.
I don't think there's anything for this year, so but
right.
They didn't actually say that it was dead or anything, so maybe they're just taking a year off. So maybe that'll come back. So we just got that and pretty much amiibos nowadays, so we're going forward. So, but yeah, it's a bummer. I was saddened by that. But yeah, Lego City. I was kind of going through the story, just kind of running through that. I've been playing that game. I haven't really seen too many like side quests on that, even though it's like an open world game. But here and there I have. But I don't know. Maybe I might have hit like the filter button on the map or something, because you can kind of filter through different things. So maybe I just kind of turned that off and I don't see that stuff anymore. So I got to go back and look through that. It's still a fun game. I really like it. It's I think I mentioned this a couple weeks ago. Once again, you kind of see things like because this is what, like a 3-4 year old game, maybe 2 or 3 year old game. So you see kind of what they had in there, and they kind of put it in some of their other games, like the Marvel and DC and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of cool to kind of go through that history of that game. And then the other game I've been playing is Dragon Ball Z Xenoverse 2, like I mentioned before. Going through pretty much the storyline for that too. There's some side quests here and there. So far, I'm pretty early in the game, maybe just a couple hours, so I haven't been hidden too much in that game. But I had the original on the 360, I think, maybe Xbox One. I can't remember when the first one came out. I don't think I ever beat that. I got maybe like halfway through, but I wanted to get this just once again for the portability. I can play wherever I'm at. So, and this one I actually do have locally on the system. On the hard drive or on my SD card, so I can pop that in anytime. Just play a few games. When you're going through the different missions, it's basically just turns into a fighting game at that point, like Dragon Ball Tenkaichi, I think it was called back in the day, where you can kind of just move around this big open area and just fight a bunch of guys. So it's pretty cool. You can also do online quests with people if you want, or do online battles. So I haven't tested any of that stuff out yet. Just because usually I haven't been at a Wi-Fi connected area, so just been playing the single player. And then also, just kind of to throw that out there, and this is not a game, but there was that update to the Switch. I think it's 4.0 now to the OS, so a bunch of different things you can do in there now. It's you can actually, a couple of hidden things I guess that's been coming out lately is the headphone support, Bluetooth headphone support, headset support. Actually, I think it's just headphones. I don't think it's like a headset. You can't talk through it.
Right.
You can do that. And then, oh man, I'm trying to think of something else I just saw earlier today. I have to look right now, but while you're talking about your games, but there's another like kind of secret hidden. I don't want to say secret, but something they kind of just didn't put out there with the rest of the info when they had released this new OS. So,
okay.
Yep, pretty much that's it. How about you? It looks like you got some Sony and Shield gameplay here.
Yeah, so it's actually been a pretty good past couple weeks for gaming, minus a few particular hiccups. So, just to talk about just to quickly run through the list of everything that I've played. So, played some Space Marshals 2 on the NVIDIA Shield Android TV, NVIDIA Shield Pro. Then I went over to my 3DS and played some Metroid Samus Returns, as well as Ace Combat Assault Horizon Legacy. And then most recently I've been playing, I broke out my PlayStation 3, got it all connected up. Had to work through some recording problems with some equipment. Outside of that, however, I played a little bit of Rainbow Six Vegas 2. And then most recently I've been playing a lot of Killzone 2. So,
nice.
So Rainbow Six Vegas 2, the thing that occurred to me as I was playing it is because Rainbow Six Vegas 2 has some problems conveying its story, right? It's one of those things you would almost think it was a game made by DICE, but it was actually made by Ubisoft, and I think this was one of the ones that was taken out of Red Storm Studios down in North Carolina and given to like one of the larger native development studios that Ubi actually grew rather than acquired. But the dialogue in it is really soft, and there's some spatial things where, like, if you're not pointed, in one specific direction, then you can barely hear the dialogue. I often miss it. There's no mini map as far as I know. Maybe there's one that you can bring up, but it doesn't tell you where you're supposed to be going. You're trying to look around your field of vision to find this little gray pip that's suspended in midair, right? That is kind of an indicator of where you need to go. But the reality is like the story isn't important, and really the main character in the game is Las Vegas. It's really just like an excuse to have these scenarios and events go down in Las Vegas. So I acknowledge that perhaps I shouldn't have groused so loudly about Rainbow Six Siege a couple of years ago and said that, I want a Rainbow Six like story. That's what I want to play. And I'm realizing that story was very paper thin. So why did we all complain about it so much? but the other thing I've been playing a lot of that I kind of had some deeper thoughts about was Killzone 2. So a game which I couldn't stand when I was playing it. I think like, I don't know, it came out in 2009, so, and I guess I bought it at launch. So 8 years ago, right, I was playing this and complaining about the game. Now I realize, you know, a couple of the things that I could address or soften the impact of myself by trying to tune the game correctly. The physics are kind of weird. They're somewhere in between Destiny and Halo, so they're not the super fast spinny physics of like a Call of Duty. So you have to get used to that. You kind of have to learn how to play the game. I do a lot of little kind of micro inputs, like when I'm playing a racing game. Essentially, it's kind of the same way I've come to find it to be most comfortable playing Killzone 2. It has a decent story. It's very bro-man kind of game. If I think back correctly, I think this game kind of spiritually was supposed to be the answer and response to Microsoft's Gears of War. So it has that same kind of a feel to it. But I also realize that the more I stick with the game, the more I start to enjoy it. Rather than when I kept coming back and hitting it like every 2 or 3 weeks, I was like, I just don't like this, and I wouldn't stick with it for that long. But I really enjoy it. I've even gotten, well, the very tightly constrained field of view still bugs me, but I've learned to kind of push past that and get further in the game. So I've really had a blast playing Killzone 2, which just occurred to me, you know, again, if we go back like 2 or 3 months where we were having the conversation about, you know, what were we thinking we were going to do for the holiday season, and one of the things we talked about as an option, you know, is that, hey, you know, I've got so many great games still in my backlog. I don't know that I need to go out and spend $60, right, on whatever game X. So I don't know. Are any games that you've played before, Prime?
Other than Rainbow Six Vegas 2, that's the only one I've ever played, and that was on the Xbox 360. Yep, I've never played the other ones. Yeah, I had a real fun time with Vegas 2. I always liked that one in the original, so especially the multiplayer. Once again, going back to the multiplayer,
yeah,
it was fun. It was different than, you know, a Call of Duty or a Battlefield, so strategic.
But you know, and Rainbow Six does a great thing for multiplayer. It's one of those games where kind of everybody's at parity, right? Yeah. So it's really just all about your skill set. It's not about like
which gun you got.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So I did find what I was trying to find before about the OS for Switch. It was the GameCube. GameCube controllers you can use now when you have the Wii U adapter, which I think came out because of Smash Brothers, I believe, originally on the Wii U. That's why they had brought that out. So yeah, as long as you have that adapter, you can use GameCube controllers. So
nice.
The article here on IGN had just like a quick little rundown on how to get that started, how to pair it up with the system. So yep, that and the 30-second video now you can do also.
Right.
Which is nice.
The thing I'm looking forward to is the ability to transfer game saves or transfer files. I need to dig into a little bit more to understand exactly. I guess my big thing is, can I get my things off my 128 gigabyte card that I have in there now, and somehow transfer them to my 200 gigabyte card. And ditto for content that I have on the Switch's onboard memory that I had to because I couldn't get it to download to the external card. My question is now, can I put a card in and then migrate that stuff off of the system's memory? So I'll have to get in there and play around with it a little.
Yeah, I know you can do game saves and data from one Switch to another, but I don't know if you can do from a card or not yet. So, which would be nice, yeah, because I just bought a 200 gig too, so that'd be nice to get everything on one card.
Right.
So I think I got like a 64 now, which is, I think I'm like halfway, maybe even 3/4 of the way full of that. So,
okay.
But yeah. All right. Anything else you got?
No, man. It does it for me.
All right, cool. That was pretty much it for me. I did play a little bit of Ark and I can't remember, the Rocket League on the Xbox One, but mostly I've been playing on the Switch, so I've been enjoying those games. Hopefully, Rocket League comes out soon. I'm waiting for that on the Switch. So I think I'm pretty much off the Xbox One once I get that in Skyrim, so I'll be set. But yeah, so that'll take us to the end of episode number 19 of Enough to Keep Going. Also, I think you mentioned earlier you have another new or entertainment show that you guys are doing.
Yeah, so So Dave Pecci and I are kind of what constitutes the entertainment crew for the E2KG network. He and I collaborate and kind of do a sequence of podcast segments where we focus on a discussion of all of the episodes in a given show, and we're specifically targeting these shows that have what I refer to as the British or European style season length, where they're going to be anywhere from 6 episodes to like 13 episodes. But we're looking for these short format season pieces of content, so we don't get locked up for a full year like having a podcast about that one thing. So right now we are recording our discussions about Fox's The Gifted. We just recorded the first one that's available via the GWW radio network feed on YouTube, which is where we're broadcasting from now. So if you want to go check out our discussion of the first 3 episodes of that show, which is kind of a higher level overview of just kind of how the show's put together, the special effects, the cinematography, the scripting, the dialogue, and the characters. We talked about a few kind of scenes, but we weren't on that format, which is normally our standard format. This was more so about the series and how it's packaged in its framework. So if you want to catch that discussion, you can definitely find that right below us in the GWW feed.
Nice. And that's only a few going to be a half season or a short season for The Gifted?
Right now, they're contracted for 10 episodes, and I don't know if that was. I feel like the way I've seen it characterized, it's for 10 episodes, and that's deliberate. And then next season will be, another 10 or whatever.
Right.
But it's weird because usually when you do something like that, that's a fall premiere. I mean, that's a mid-season premiere coming off the winter break. So the other possibility is that they were contracted for those 10 episodes, with an option to extend to a full season depending on how Fox felt things were going after the first few months. But right now, for the sake of the podcast, I hope it's just 10 episodes.
All right. So you got that? Is that on a certain day every week, or you guys?
We're a little schizophrenic about that right now because
a little floaty.
Yeah. Both Dave's work schedule and my work schedule have recently changed, and so normally we would record on Wednesday nights. It's right now if we did that, I would be starting that very late, which is a possibility. But if we record on the weekends, we can do it at a more reasonable time. So, which is a slight disadvantage because The Gifted is on Monday nights. So we may wind up recording on Sundays, so that at least that show will be available for you on the YouTube channel. If you watch the show on a delay, because of DVR, whatever streaming service you use, you could certainly grab our video and listen to it on the go or on your commute before you get home to watch that Monday night episode or watch it the following day. It's kind of how we're envisioning how the content, an optimal way to consume that content.
Okay, cool. Well, you can come back here on Thursday where we have our E2KG in 30, our news show. Well, I believe it's you and DB maybe this week, if I remember correctly.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. So that's every Thursday at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock Eastern, 9 o'clock Central. And then obviously you want to come back here next Tuesday for Enough to Keep Going number 20, where we have, I'm sure, another exciting topic and more playlists and games that we've played we'll talk about. So on behalf of Mr. Agathocles Stamos, I am Osiris Prime. Keep it here on the GWW network, and we will see you next time.